You're listening to Barbell Logic, brought to you by Barbell Logic Online Coaching, where each week we take a systematic walk through strength training and the refining power of voluntary hardship.
Today we're going to talk about cues. What is a cue?
Are you asking me for real? You want me to tell you?
No, well, yeah, sure. Tell the folks.
Yeah, so when we coach somebody, we are walking through this process where, first off, you have to understand, in order to be a good coach, you have to have this amount of knowledge that really sets you apart to be a good coach, right? And I'm not talking about just a strength trainer. I'm talking about anything, right? To teach.
Executive coach, anything.
Life coach.
Right.
You better be a pro at life.
Right.
Right. But now for strength coaching, you start to think about what are the things that you need to have knowledge in? Where is the understanding occur? Well, I mean, look, you've got to have the education. That's part of it. But that doesn't mean you can coach. That may just mean that you got this kind of academic knowledge. And
I think it's possible to be a very, very good coach and not really know much of that other stuff too.
It is, certainly. Although what we know is that the 18-year-old kid at the purple gym doesn't know that stuff.
No.
Right?
No.
So it's one of the things I can do to separate myself. But another big piece of it is you have to have experience, both as a lifter and as a coach. How well can you coach linear progression or any of these tough things, having never gone through it? You have to have gone through it. Not only having never gone through it, but I would argue having struggled through it, right? If you are, we talk a lot that the best athletes make the worst coaches, and it's because it just comes too easy to them.
They just yell, do better.
Yeah, there needs to be some struggle. But then, of course, the experience that you get from coaching and teaching these methods cannot be purchased, cannot be learned via education. It has to be experienced in the trenches of the gym. And so what we have found is that after you have taught somebody a method of lifting, let's say the squat, I've taught you the squat method, right? This is how to squat.
The model,
right? But there's a method that we teach, and that teaching is based on the model, right?
Okay.
And so what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to teach a method of squatting, which gets you to squat, to look, your anthropometry may be different, but in general, bars over the middle of the foot, I'm going to sit back, hip drive, have more horizontal torso, all those sorts of things, right? So I'm trying to get you aligned with the model. At that point, I don't reteach you the squat ever again,
right?
Barring you left for 5 years and came back, right? If you continue to train, the teaching portion of this is over, and I move on to the evaluation and communication part of this. And so now I've taught you the model via this method. You perform that, and I'm watching you with my coaching eye, and I'm going, how close is this to the model? And in places where there is...
And the model isn't the picture of that guy.
It's not the picture of the guy, because the picture of that guy, he's got special anthropometry specific to him, right?
He's a long torso dude. And
short femurs, right? Looks good. Makes it look for,
Yep.
I mean, if you're in Asia, sure, looks like that guy. But so a cue is a trigger. It is a reminder. It's a reminder of something I've already taught. It is very concise. It's loud. It's assertive, right? Somewhat authoritative, right? And it says, do this right. It's a positive thing almost always. A cue isn't, you were forward on your toes. Well, they didn't fix anything.
That's an
I
observation.
just told them what they did wrong, right? And so a cue is a reminder of something I've already taught. It's very concise, very clear. It's loud. It's loud because when somebody's got a bunch of weight on their back, those senses start to go away.
It's loud unless it's a visual or tactile cue.
Right. So there are various cues, right? So there are various ways. Can we do a visual cue? Of course we can. I had a lady, you guys probably saw it on my Instagram. I had a lady who was totally deaf since birth, who came, Miss McLeod, with her husband Sam, and I don't know, they were in their mid to upper 20s.
Young people.
Good-looking family, good-looking kids. She came in for a coaching session. He said, do you think you could coach her? She's totally deaf. And I said, yeah, I can coach her. I mean, I was excited, actually, because it was something different. She's not the first. I think she's probably the third or fourth person I've coached that's deaf. And I had to use all visual cues. Now, I can also use tactile cues. Right? The problem with the tactile cue is she can't hear me say anything. So if you go down to the bottom of a squat and I smack you on the top of your sacrum and go, okay, right here, drive this up. I can't say, okay, right here, drive this up. Right. So I had
this. Like, why is this?
Yeah, why is he smacking me on the ass? Right. And so I would stand in front of her. So when I coach most people, we stand rear oblique, right? So we stand rear and to the side because it lets us see the most things. And we mostly use verbal cues. Now, we definitely use tactile cues and we use visual cues when the weight is light. But as the weight gets heavy into heavy work sets, I don't want to be smacking you anywhere. I don't want to touch you anywhere. No. So tactical cues don't work when it's heavy. And then visual cues, same sort of thing. Like we spend a lot of time, say on a squat, focusing your eyes on a specific place. Actually, we do that on all the lifts, right? We tell you exactly where to look. And if at that point you have to divert your eyes and look at me, I've screwed this up.
How many times have you yelled at a lifter, don't look at me. Don't look at me.
Almost every time I've coached somebody for the first time. At a seminar, every single platform that I coach, I have to yell at them to not look at me. Listen to the words I say. Do not look at my face, right? If you're set up on a squat and you're looking at the floor 4 or 5 feet in front of you and I start to coach you from rear oblique and you turn around and look at me, no, not okay. So yes, cues can be visual, verbal, or tactile. And primarily we use verbal.
Yeah.
So
in cues, we give instruction, and the cue is a reminder of that instruction often. But they are also a cue to often overcorrect something to get the movement to look proper.
Okay, so what I think we can do is we can walk through, there's actually kind of a cue linear progression, right? Maybe a better way to say it. So what I mean by that is we know that we want your knees to go out in the squat. We're not thinking about them going out. Do they go any other direction other than out? Sure, they go forward a little bit, right? Especially in the first third of the descent, and then they stop, and they should be pushed out to the sides. Okay. Yep. So here's not a good cue. Somebody starts to squat, and the knees aren't going out. I say, okay, now what I want you to do is, I want you to push your knees out to the sides. Way too many words. I could say knees out, or I could just say knees. Because I've already told you what your knees do.
Right.
And when I say the word knees, you just thinking about your knees go, oh, shit, it's supposed to be out.
He doesn't told me twice.
Right. He's already told me knees out. Now, there are also times when I'm going to use cues that don't tell a lifter exactly what I want them to do. It's an overcorrection cue to get them to move the way I want them to move. So let's stop for a second. What is coaching? Well, do you remember how we define coaching?
We're trying to get the person to move the way we want them to move according to our model.
That's exactly right. We're trying to get them to move the way we want them to move based on the model. What matters is, can I say words or point somewhere in the sky or tap them somewhere to get them to do the thing right? And if I can, that's great. By the way, that's what coaching is. It's not programming.
Yep.
It's not macronutrient breakdowns. It's none of that.
Those are necessary.
It's also not even teaching the lift, right? Like lots of people can teach it. As a matter of fact, I've seen tons of people at seminars who are going for the certification teach that thing as well as anybody could teach it. And then when it came time to coach it, they struggled.
So we say things that can overcorrect for the inaccurate proprioception that the lifter has, and then they in turn do exactly what we want them to do.
Sure. So
we say silly stuff. Like I had a lifter in his deadlift. He just would not get he couldn't get his lower back in extension. He's one of those kind of 1 in 8 guys that just can't get the anterior pelvic tilt down in the squat and in the deadlift.
Sure.
He said, tell me tight hips.
He told you that?
Yeah. He said, I stood in front of the mirror and I did that and messed with my back and did this. And I think if you tell me tight hips, I'll know what you mean and I'll get it. And I'll be damned if it didn't work.
Well, that's all that matters.
I don't even know what it means.
Sure.
Fine. It got the guy to move.
Yeah.
If I could yell asparagus at a guy and squat right, I'd yell it.
Of course.
Whatever,
it doesn't matter.
We'll give a cue that the 100 people that we coached just previous to them worked, and it's meaningless to the guy in front of you.
Sure.
And you have to find a way to communicate the movement to that person.
Yeah. I think that we've kind of set up this education for how to lift and how to coach, and here's the model. And then other people critics who claim that strength's so crazy cold and we say things wrong and stuff, they'll point to the overcorrection cues and say, we say stuff like
lean over,
right? Well, that's not because we actually want somebody to do a good morning. It's because their back is too damn vertical.
His knee's too far forward. His back's too vertical. His hips aren't back.
Right? Sure. I say get on your heels. I say get on your heels all the time. I don't want anybody on their heels. I want them on the middle of their foot. But if they're on their toe, on their toe, on their toe,
the heels guy is the guy's heel is literally
coming off the ground with squat shoes on.
Yeah,
with squat shoes on. And I'm going like midfoot.
Well, that's clearly an ankle mobility problem.
Yeah, it's an ankle mobility problem, of course. And so then I'll say get on your heels. Get on your heels. And what they'll do is they'll rock back to their midfoot, and they did exactly what I wanted to do, right? So that kind of hip drive or lead with the hips, right? Like, again, lead with the hips. How much leading of the hips do we want on the squat? Well, like not very much, because we essentially want the back angle to be maintained, right? You set that back angle first thing on the descent. So in that first third of the descent, those knees go forward and out where they're supposed to go. They stop, boom, the back angle is set, and the back angle stays all the way down and all the way up. But if I say lead with the hips, well, that would indicate that the hips would come up first.
Right.
The back would become more horizontal, and that's a problem. By the way,
if a guy's leading with the chest, telling him to lead with the hips,
that's exactly right. And for you get bent over. So what do I say to you?
You tell me to high bar squat. My bar is low on my back.
That's
You're
right.
Like, keep your chest up. Lead with your chest. High bar squat.
That's right. Do I actually want you to lead with your chest? Of course not.
I can't.
Right. No, you can't. But you're going to try.
So for me, that works. I have people that have the same problem I have, and I tell them, lead with the chest. I tell them, pretend like it's a high bar squat. I tell them, act like you're sitting at a straight back chair. I mean, I do everything I can to get them as vertical as possible, and they still get leaned way over.
Sure.
So overcorrective cues are necessary on the platform.
Yeah, no, I mean, I even understand why, miscommunication occurs. And so how about this? How many cues can we give in an individual lift?
In an individual rep?
On a rep.
God, one. You might be able to give two, one on the way down and one on the way up.
Right, or one in the setup and one while the bar moves.
Yeah.
Right, so you think about one of the hardest things about a squat is almost everything that you screw up during a squat happens while the bar is moving.
Certainly.
So sometimes I'll say, so I have a 3Q word, all kind of 3 Qs that I use before the bar starts moving on the squat. I say butt back, knees out, nipples down. Butt back, knees out, nipples down. Butt back, knees out. I say it before the bar starts moving, right? Like once the bar starts moving, that should have already happened.
Do you ever tell people to give you a checklist? Like I do it a lot on the deadlift. Like tell me what you're going to do. Like I've taught them over and over again the 5 steps of the deadlift. I'm like, tell me. Right. And I'll tell them before they initiate
you want to hear the 5 steps from them?
Yeah. And then we're like, okay, you're ready to squat. It's going to be heavy. What are you going to do?
Yeah.
And back, knees out, nipples down. They may have a thing that's their own problem. Yep. And I want to hear them give me that cue before we even get started. Sure. Then when we do that, I know we're on the same page. And when I give them that cue, I know they already acknowledge it. We're both acknowledging it. I'm trying to clarify communication.
Sure. No, that makes sense. The deadlift is the big one there because they've got the 5 things that they have to do before. The deadlift is much easier because everything you have to think about on the deadlift really occurs before the bar moves.
Yep.
Once the bar is ready to move, all I have to think about is leg pressing the earth away and keeping the bar in contact with my legs.
The deadlift,
drag it up.
The deadlift's the best. If it's heavy and you do it wrong, it's not going to come off the floor anyway.
Yeah, right.
Like once it starts moving, you're right.
Yeah.
Pretty
if
much.
it's 700 pounds, it's over the middle of your foot.
Pretty much right.
Let's talk about on the squat, what are some of your favorite cues that you get? Not necessarily overcorrective cues, but just in general, what are some of your favorite cues?
Well, knees out.
Knees out.
Ass back.
Ass back.
Stay leaned over longer. When they're coming out of the hole, stay leaned over longer.
Keep your nipples down. I say reach back in the hole. So
and then
knee
I just
slide.
So I tell them, reach back with your butt.
Yep.
Right. That's after the rep.
Yep.
Right. And then I tell him, reach back.
Yep.
And then what do I say? What's the next time he does? Back.
Right. You just keep cutting it down.
Yeah.
Well, the problem I get sometimes with reach back is they'll sit back first thing with their hips.
Mm-hmm.
Their shins will stay vertical, which again, is some of the critics will talk about, well, you sit all the way back, you got vertical shins, you're bent way over. Well, I don't want vertical shins, right? From the very beginning, at the exact same time, that's why I say butt back, knees out, nipples down. I want those knees to go forward and out. I want the butt to go back, and I want you to bend over first thing. All 3 of those things should occur at exactly the same time.
Yep.
Now, the problem is if the hips reach back too far early and the shins stay vertical, then we tend to get knee slide in the bottom.
Yep.
And the knee slide in the bottom in that situation is a little different than when somebody is used to high bar squat and the knees go way too far forward, right? I don't want the knees to move in the bottom of a squat, even if they move forward to the spot where they should have been.
They lose tightness when that happens.
Right. So we get them to set their knees early. And then we tell them as you approach the bottom, I say the last 2 inches of the bottom as you're approaching the hole, that's when you reach back with your butt. That's when your butt goes backwards. I told your dad that today. Your dad was box squatting today. So your dad was box squatting. He's had some back issues and stuff, and your dad's old as balls. And so he was sitting down on the box, and he had a box that was turned.
He's sitting on the
diagonal. He's sitting on the corner. And the very corner of that box was touching his taint. And I said, listen, Frog, because his name is Frog, if you haven't heard these stories. I said, Frog, you got to sit on the box like you sit on a toilet. I go, right now, if you're sitting on a toilet, you shit in the floor.
Again?
Don't shit in the floor.
Right.
You've got to sit to the back of the toilet. If you sit on a toilet, you sit in the back of the toilet. So you poop in the toilet, not on the floor. You don't sit on the front edge of the toilet.
So condescending.
And it immediately fixed it. He was like, oh, I get it. And he sat back, right? And so...
we make these, crude cues all the time. We've talked about it on the show.
Yeah.
Point your taint at the wall. All those. And the poop ones. And man,
they work better than anything else.
Freud was onto something. Like, people are keenly aware of those parts of their body and all those functions. Like, the person with the worst spatial awareness in the world knows exactly
where their butthole is.
Exactly at all times.
I mean, it's one of my favorite ones. I say, present your butthole to the wall. Point your butthole at the wall. At the wall.
Mm-hmm.
Listen, like, if you're going to take a shit, if you're going to you're going to have explosive diarrhea, I want you to spray diarrhea all over the wall, not on the floor. Right now, we say that a lot of times because on a deadlift...
Yeah, they're setting their back in the deadlift.
They don't know how to set their back, right? So they kind of squeeze their chest up, but their low back is still rounded and their butt's still pointed. They still got that kind of curve in their lumbar. So I'll tell them, I say, well, look, point your butthole at the wall behind you. Point your nipples at the wall in front of you. Sometimes I'll say, like, you've got a shirt on right now, it says data storage. I'll say, squeeze your chest up until I can read the logo on your shirt.
Yep.
I'll say that a lot, right? So those are some of the ones I use for squat and deadlift.
Use those so much.
Yeah,
knees out, knees out, knees out. A lot of people on the way out of the hole, they get knock-kneed. Their knees come in, so it's knees out, knees out, knees out. And then I'll just get down there. I'll crawl down there on all fours and put my hand on the outside of their knee, and I'm like, "Don't you get your knee off my hand?"
Right.
Right. Inevitably they do. And that one's a really hard one to correct. Like, you can tell them exactly what you need them to do. You can put your hand there or put a tubo on the outside of their leg. There's your cue, tactile cue, tubo.
Tubo is one of the best.
Sometimes we'll use props. But you put a terribly useful block of wood on the outside of their knee and tell them to keep your knee out against this, so we can communicate that exactly. Yeah. So they understand what it is. And when that's a hard one to break, when those knees come in.
Yeah.
And it's terribly inefficient too.
And then going out, or the knees coming in and they get valgus, is most people are pretty good at making the knees go out on the way down.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'll remind them at the top of the lift before they get ready to go again. I'll say, okay, listen, the knees don't just go out on the way down. They go out on the way up. They go, okay, all right, knees out on the way up, knees out on the way up. And then here we go, take a deep breath, and they descend. And then as they start, knees out, knees out, knees out on the way up, right? Because they start to think, like, they only think about the knees going out on the way down. And then the problem is that they're getting valgus on the way up. That's where they need to think about it. So yeah, I'll say that a lot.
It's hard to pull the knees out with the abductors as you're pushing the floor away.
Sure.
It's really hard. I have trouble with that.
Sure, of course.
So
I think everybody does, right? And I think that it's probably a weakness there. I mean, anytime it gets heavy, you start to see form break down. You have to distinguish, well, did the form break down because they just screwed this thing up and misgrooved it? Or is there actually some weak points here that are falling apart? Like, something eventually falls apart, right? No matter what lift it is, like, there is a weak link in the chain. What is the weak link in the chain? Can we identify that? Can we try to hammer on it? So if you see somebody, especially females who are valgus and the knees go in, and I see them fighting to get it out, and they're still not great, the fact that they're fighting it and they're recognized, like, we're making progress.
You bet.
That's a big piece of it for sure.
Have you broken down why that's mechanically bad? I have a theory.
Okay. My theory is why they get valgus on the way up, or what are you asking?
Well, so most of the time when people's knees cave, when they come out of the hole, actually they do it when they hit the hard spot.
Sure.
And then they go back out again and then they come back in. Well, I mean, there's your answer. The adductors work twice.
Sure.
Well, that's inefficient.
Yeah. So the role of the abductors, abductors, the outside of your ass, is really to anchor the knees out. They do the same thing that the hamstrings do in a deadlift. They anchor the hip, right? So the abductors in a squat anchor the knees out. External rotation, abduction of the knees. If the knees are allowed to externally rotate, the femurs are allowed to externally rotate, the knees are allowed to abduct, and the outside of your ass is strong enough to do that, then When the adductors, which are stretched in abduction, the adductor is the inside of your thigh. When they shorten, they contribute to hip extension. So that the inside of your thigh, then, if the abductors are doing their job and they're holding isometrically, then as the adductors, the inside of your thigh, stretches into the bottom and then shortens on the way up, they contribute to hip extension. So I think that's what the problem is, that most people, and certainly most females, are very quad dominant. Their quads are stronger. Their anterior part of their leg,
thanks soccer,
that's right, is stronger than the posterior part of their body. So their butts, outside their butts, like glute med, glute minimus, and their adductors, right, adductor longus, are weak in comparison to their quads. So what they do is they get this thing where the adductors pull the knees in, the abductors aren't strong enough to keep the knees out, and they put everything on the quads, and then they just shift forward. By the way, most of the time you'll see when the knees come in, there's also a shift forward. They get on the quads, and all of a sudden then it's all about knee extension at that point. Well, like, it's really inefficient. We go back to what we're trying to do, which is the most effective way to get strong is use the most muscle mass possible. Well,
right.
the second those knees come in, you've screwed yourself because you've pulled a bunch of muscle groups out of the thing. So yeah, I think that's what's going on there. So hardest thing to fix in all coaching, but especially online coaching, is setting the back in extension on the bottom of a deadlift. Would you agree?
Yep.
And holding it in extension.
Holding it.
As you pull it off the floor. Well, although setting it's hard for a lot of people. If they've never set it, dude, it's hard to get them to set it online.
Yeah, I can get them, even once I get them set it, get them to hold it's really, really tough. Something about, men in their 20s, it's really tough. I don't know what it is. So cues, we tell them to put their shoulder blades. So think about this, right? Picture in your mind. They're down in the hole on the deadlift. Their feet are under the bar. They're bent over, got their knees out into their elbows. They got high hips. That's a cue. Sure. High hips because they're dropping their butt. It's not because I want not because I want, straight knees.
Right. I don't want a straight leg deadlift.
I don't want them to drop their hips. So I go high hips, get your chest up.
Yep.
Then they don't set their back. Then I tell them point their taint at the wall. That doesn't do it. I tell them put your shoulder blades in your back pockets. Put your shoulder blades in your back pockets.
Yeah. I've used that before too.
Put your neck in your crack.
Right.
And then that doesn't work. We work with it. And then, like you said, online coaching, this one's really tough. And then I'll have them do Supermans. I have them lay on the floor, lift their shoulders and their knees off the ground, hold it for a 3 count, relax.
Right.
Hold it
10 times or whatever.
Yeah. Their lower back gets really, really tired. Those muscles that are tired right now, the ones that are burning, those are the ones you have to get tight to get into extension.
Yep.
Then I have them go deadlift light, and often they can feel it. If that doesn't work, gosh, we end up doing like high rack pulls and working all the way down.
Yep. I've done the same thing. RDLs, you start them, they set the back at the top, and then they start to go down.
Yeah.
You go down real slow. Now, RDLs, I'll use that far more in live coaching than I do in online coaching.
Yeah.
Because with an RDL, I can actually watch them and go, okay, lower slow, push your butt back, stop right there.
Yep.
Now come back up. Right.
Yeah, so we're watching in an RDO when you're in person, you're watching to see that moment right when that back starts to round. And when it does, you tell them
up. Going to flexion. Nope. Hold it tight. Back up. Yeah. And you can't do that in real time.
You have them hold it there at that point? Or?
No, when it starts, I just want to make sure they get back into extension as quickly as they can, as soon as they start to fail. What I don't want to do, if somebody has a hard time holding their back into an extension, one of the fallacies of coaching is that they think that their back is weak. Now, it may be weak, but the inability to hold your back in extension is not fixed by back extensions, by 45-degree extensions or reverse hypers or whatever. And so one of the things that is sort of conventional wisdom is, well, if we do a lot of like 45-degree hyperextensions, is a terrible word because it's not actually hyperextension, but extensions, back extensions on a back extension, sort of machine, or reverse hyperextensions where the back is static and the lower body goes through flexion extension. I really don't want my people to ever go through anything that takes their back through flexion and extension, because the back operates isometrically really in all of normal human movement, including barbell training. And so do I think a reverse hyper and a back extension are totally worthless exercises? No. I think there's probably some stuff that you can do with those as more advanced lifters who don't have any problem holding their back at an extension. But for a novice lifter, again, we're all about return on investment, right? And so I want biggest bang for my buck, which means for novice lifters, it's the 4 lifts. That's the thing. And so I've got to teach them how to hold that back in extension in a deadlift. And if the deadlift doesn't do it, there's been a few times at a seminar, we've had a guy that's, 70 years old and cannot get his back an extension at the bottom of a deadlift. And so we just have them rack pull. We just take the bar up a few inches until they can get their back an extension. And rack pull. And what you would do if you continue to coach a person like that, or if that's you, is you rack pull and get your weight up to a moderately heavy weight. And then you drop the pins down one hole and you work for another week or two, 2 inches lower, 1 inch lower, and then do it again, go from there.
I just realized we really haven't defined extension. So when you scare a cat, his back goes into flexion.
Flexion is rounded primarily.
In the extension, you can think of a flat back. I actually like to see just a little concavity in the lumbar on the deadlift, a little bit, but that's when the spine is in extension. And, like you said, some people think it's weakness. Sometimes it is, but the spinal erectors that pull our back into extension are some of the most poorly innervated muscles in our body, and they're just really hard to control. There's no fine motor skill in the lower back. Nobody could write cursive with their lower back.
Yeah.
And so those are really, really hard to control. And we have to just kind of program those pathways.
Yeah. All like one motor unit to
just terrible.
Like one impulse goes fire and the whole thing, it does. There's not like your fingers or eyelids or something.
Almost any little boy can preferentially flex his bicep, make a muscle.
Yeah, sure.
And so, that's good motor control of that muscle group there. Like I said, about 1 in 8 guys just can't do that with their lower back.
And that might be a conservative number. By the way, the athletic stance, the quote unquote athletic stance of, if you're a shortstop, or somebody, second baseman, whatever, like that athletic stance of kind of standing there sort of erect with your back in extension. So your back nice and flat, chest up, ass out. We do that in baseball. We do that in volleyball. We do it in like a linebacker or fullback in football. It's the exact same stance for everybody.
90% of the pictures you've seen of a gorilla.
That's right. Right, standing in normal anatomical extension there, right? And so, and by the way, we should mention for hypermobile people, specifically hypermobile females, it is possible to put your back in overextension. And overextension is really probably a little more dangerous on your back than flexion.
I think so.
But I will say, it's pretty rare. It's pretty rare to see overextension.
I've had one this year.
Yeah, it happens. But it was funny back when we did.
I probably didn't have any last year.
When we had more CrossFitters, we had a lot more people who were hypermobile and they could get their backs in overextension, which is a problem. So the back fails lifting in flexion, not in shear. We don't spondy our back. We don't shear our back apart. And so one of the things we're trying to do as coaches, one of the hardest things we do as coaches is try to keep people to get their back in extension. So, hey, one of my favorite, we were talking about this on Slack the other day, one of my favorite tactile cues for the deadlift is also a tubo.
Oh, yeah.
And so tubo, I've never heard anybody else do this. I'm sure there are other people that do.
The Shipley.
Yeah, the JD Shipley is where I learned it. So one of the problems you get, a tubo, the useful block of wood, terribly useful block of wood.
Right.
I know I screwed something up there. So you take a block of wood, I like a 4x4, works better like a 4x4.
I just use a foam roller.
Yeah, foam roller is okay too. Something that just stands up, and it's 2-3 feet long. And what you do is you set it for a squat. You set it somebody right on their, basically at their toes. The very first thing they do is they have to touch that board or that foam roller with their knees. So get their knees out and forward, right on kind of on top of their toes. And of course, some of it depends on how long their femurs are and whatnot. And then their knees aren't supposed to move the rest of the time. So if it's touching that board and their knees don't move, then they're fine. If their knees move forward, it's going to knock the board over, knock the foam roller over. It gives them some sort of tactile, like, oops, I obviously let my knees slide forward because I knocked the board over. So on deadlifts, one of the things we see is premature extension of the knees, which is not the same thing, in fact. And so the knees extend on a deadlift. They set up on the deadlift. The setup might look fine. They start to pull. The very first thing that happens is the hamstrings aren't able to anchor the ass down. Yep. The knees extend. Now, we want the knees to extend to initiate the pull of the deadlift, but if the bar doesn't move and the knees extend, the shoulders lurch forward.
Yep.
If the shoulders lurch forward, we've got a problem.
Shoulders lurch forward, knee comes back, bars off the shins now. It's just hanging in space.
It's a total disaster.
This is awful.
Right? So what you can do is you can take a tubo, if the tubo is long enough, and you can get them set up on that deadlift setup, go through the 5-step setup, right? So they stance 1 inch from the bar, go down and grab the bar just outside your legs, shins forward to the bar, knees out, squeeze the chest up, keep the hips high, ready. And then you put that tubo right up against their front shoulder, like their right shoulder, one of their shoulders. You stand it up, and as they come up, their shoulders don't get to lurch forward.
Yep.
Their shoulders are forward of the bar. The shoulders are going to be a little bit forward of the bar, but they shouldn't go more forward than that as they start to try to pull the bar off. So as the knees extend, the hips come with it. Just like in a squat, as the hips drive, as we get hip drive, the bar goes with the hips. So the bar stays caught up with the hips. And so the 2-0 works really well for a deadlift if you got a problem with your shoulders lurching forward at the beginning of a deadlift.
Nick Delgadillo will yell at people when they have that problem, stay in the knees.
Yep.
I'll tell people to open their hip first. Yeah. Sometimes that'll help fix it.
Yeah. Which is an overcorrective cue. It's not something you actually want them to do.
Yep. And here's the really overcorrective cue that I've used. So I tell them stay in the knees. They go, what do you mean? And I'll say, okay, you need to keep your knee bent as long as you can.
Yeah.
So I'll tell them that. If that doesn't work, I'll tell them open the hip first. Again, these are overcorrective cues.
All overcorrective cues.
The third most wildly overcorrective one is I'll tell them pull the bar. Pull it.
Yeah, like actually, yeah. Yeah, and you probably just as often, if you're like me, you say leg press the earth away.
No, 97%
all the time. Leg press. You get really, really tight, and you actually don't want to think about pulling the bar. Yep. You want to get as tight as you can against the bar, and you just want to push your feet
there's the cue.
Through the floor.
Your arms are ropes. Your arms are cables.
That's right.
Loose arms.
Yep.
Yeah. If somebody's shrugging or rowing it, they're bending their elbow, you tell them loose arms. Yep. Arms are cables. Those are all overcorrective cues.
Yep, that's all good. Bench press and press, I tell them throw it back all the time. Both of those. Throw it behind you, throw it back. So on a press, throw it behind you, throw it behind you. On bench press, throw it over your face, float it over your face, get it back over your face.
Push it back to the rack. I tell them, here's my new favorite.
Those are all overcorrective cues, by the way.
Yep. My new favorite tactile cue. I'll have young men particularly. Then you tell them, okay, now they're at lockout. I tell them, take the mental picture, the bar against the ceiling, like we talked about in the bench press episode. And then I'll touch their chest. I'll say, touch the bar right here, and then press it right back on the ceiling.
Yep.
And they miss the spot on their chest by 2.5 inches.
Yeah, it happens all the time.
And then I'll push it again. I'll say, nope, right here. There. And they miss again. Yep. You know what I do then?
What?
I thump them on the sternum as hard as I can. I'm like, wham! And they hit it. Every single time they hit it. They're pissed, and they hit it. And I go, I told you, I knew you'd hit it.
I'll tell you one I use on the getting it back is, everybody that knows me knows I wear a hat all the time. So I've always got a hat on. So on bench press, as it starts to grind, and I know that conventional wisdom is to stay completely out of the sight picture of the lifter.
Right.
But I'll step up a little bit and I'll say, push the bar at the bill of my cap.
Yep.
And their eyes will divert right to the edge of my cap, and they'll try to push the bar right at the edge of my hat. If I'm a spotter, you think about where a spotter would stand on a bench press, it's exactly the right line. And so, nope, back at the bill of my cap, back of my hat, back of my hat, back of my hat.
So I step forward until I push it to me, push it to me, push it to me, push it to me. Yeah.
You got to get a hat.
Right.
Hats work better.
And then, of course, on the press, hit your nose, push it through your bangs, push it to your eyebrows, push it behind you.
Yep.
Charity tells people, and you got this one from you, I think, push your elbows to the ceiling. That'll help people push
elbows to the ceiling.
Yeah.
One I don't use, but I've seen it work really well, is that tight armpits.
Yep.
You know what? I think a lot of times with cues, too, as a coach, you tend to say the things that have worked for you better first, right? There's no way around that. And I can't figure out how to get my armpits tight.
Yeah, tight armpits. I've heard that one.
Yeah.
Hold oranges in your armpits.
Yeah, I've heard that too.
Yeah. I've actually put a pencil under their arm. I'm like, don't drop this damn pencil.
Yeah, right.
So, of course they have to, but they hold that as long as they can. Sure. It will correct that movement.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And the people that have a hard time getting their hips, their anterior pelvic tilt and their back and extension in the deadlift, I'll put a pencil in their hip crease.
Yeah, make them do that. I remember you saying that before.
That works great.
Yeah.
Because they can feel that when they can't do anything they can't feel anything in their back.
Side. Yeah, that makes sense. No, that's good. So cues are reminders of something we've already taught. It's a trigger that says, do this now. Do it fast, right? It's concise, it's assertive, it's loud, because cues are done most of the time while the barbell is still moving, right? We can't give very many of them as a coach. We can give one or two on the slow lifts on something like a power clean. You really can't cue anything while the bar moves. You have to cue it before. That's why we don't ever cue on the clean, the jump position. So we teach on a clean, like the bar touches your thighs. If you say jump, or jump now or whatever, by the time they have interpreted that, they've long since missed the jump position. Yeah. So I always have to correct that at a seminar. Somebody's, telling somebody when to jump. I go, whoa. Don't tell them when to jump, right? Likewise, unless we've had 45 minutes of problems on a squat depth, I don't want you to call somebody up on a squat. I want you to feel what just below parallel feels like. Right. I want you to be listening for my voice, and then you're always going to be like, where was his voice? I'm listening. So what we're trying to do when we cue is in the most efficient way possible. We're trying to get the lifter to move the way we want them to move, which means we say words that we don't exactly mean. We may lie to people. We may overcorrect things. We may say things that are not exactly true. We may say, take a big breath of air into your belly. I know you don't breathe air into your belly. You can't get any air in your belly, like things like that. But we'll say those things because we're trying to get them to move the way we want to move based on the model that we're teaching.
Yeah, don't spurg out when you hear somebody say that. They're trying to get the individual person they're working with to move the right way.
It's good.
Well, yeah, those are cues.
And you guys, if you're interested in having a coach walk you through these cues, by the way, cues are interesting for online coaching because we had to learn over the last couple of years how to type cues, right? So we talked about in this episode that we use verbal, tactile, and visual cues. What we didn't talk about was in online coaching, we use a lot of typed cues. And those typed cues are a little different, but they still have to be very, very assertive, but they also have to be very memorable, right? Because now you're not trying to remember them from rep 2 to rep 3. You're trying to remember them from Tuesday to Thursday.
Yeah, we have to be very careful about how we talk to people about this stuff when we're typing. You know, one of the first things we noticed is like we can't refer to the deadlift as a pull anymore.
No.
When you type it, they'll pull it.
They'll actually pull it.
No. So we have to stop saying it's a standing leg press.
That's right. It's a standing leg press.
So when we do online coaching, we can't use that shorthand. So we had to change our style. It's pretty interesting.
The advantage we have with online coaching with cues is that we're able to do some visual cues online that you're not able to do in real life, right? So visual cues, real life, you're just kind of standing in front of somebody, pointing directions like pointing knees out or whatever, eyes here, and you point where the eyes are supposed to go, or, but on online coaching, we're able to use a lot of video editing and picture editing, screenshots, kind of John Madden breakdown like you see on Monday Night Football. We're able to like draw directly on the video, and here's what you're doing, and here's where your hips went, and here's where I want them to go. And so we're able to use visual cues probably in a more effective way in online coaching than we can in real life.
Yeah.
We're not able to use verbal cues at all because we're not there in real time. We're not able to use tactile cues at all because we're not there. But we are able to walk through the written cues. And we spent quite a bit of time trying to refine those as an entire coaching staff to make sure these things are memorable and assertive and they're able to get the job done. And so if you'd like to find out what that looks like and you're interested in online coaching, if you don't have an online coach that lives in your town, we'd love to have you in online coaching or online coaching plus full nutrition. We have, of course, nutrition coaching now. We've got multiple registered dietitians on staff, and we would love to have you there.
This has been the Barbell Logic Podcast. Please tell a friend to give us a subscribe on their favorite podcast app, and also go to your favorite outlet, whether that's Google Play, Stitcher, TuneIn Radio, and give us a good review there. But again, as always, thanks so much for listening.